Hey everyone, really happy that you can join me for this presentation on what I call asynchronous coaching. And this presentation it's a little bit meta because um, this has actually been pre-recorded and then you're consuming this at your own pace, which is exactly what I'm going to talk about today. So let me share my screen with you and we can get started on the presentation. Um, so once again, the word is a bit of a mouthful, okay? But the Merriam-Webster definition of it is simply things that are not simultaneous or concurrent in time. So if you're having a face-to-face conversation or even a phone conversation with somebody, it's simultaneous, right? You can talk and listen in real time. Whereas what I'm talking about now is when the delivery of the content and the consumption of the content happens at different moments, which the most obvious and I think the most frequent experience we have with that is reading someone else's writing. So obviously they're not typing out the article as you're reading it. They've typed it out a day, a month, a year, maybe 100 years in advance, and now you're reading what's already been written. And I find that really interesting because I think a lot of people would consider writing to be the highest form of communication because as the writer, you can think through everything and it really forces you to flesh out your arguments and really crystallize your thought into something that's elegant and something that's concise. And then as a reader, you have the benefit of consuming that as opposed to maybe a rambling conversation or something that's less focused. So in terms of how I consume content, I love reading more than let's say watching a live stream or YouTube video or anything of that nature, just because it just seems to me like the information is much denser and you can make things a lot more elegant and a lot more concise. And this is the idea that we're trying to get to, because obviously no matter what industry you're in, things are moving fast. We have more information than ever. And I think it's important to find ways to streamline our communication, to make things just more concise and more efficient. And the one event that really I think shaped certainly my thinking, but a lot of other people's thinking on this topic is the COVID-19 pandemic. So obviously, as someone who works in sports, I was impacted fairly early in the process when the AHL shut down. I basically had to go home and sit at home for a month and a half or whatever. So then coaches, obviously, they couldn't be with their teams, with their players, get on the ice, coach games. It's completely changed the way that they work. And for anyone who's kind of like a aside from essential workers, but someone who works in an office, obviously now instead of being in the office, you're at home, you're doing a lot more via video conferencing, or you're working remotely. And there are certainly lots of challenges because as human beings, I think we're social creatures, and we like there to be a physical component to things, whether it's seeing people face to face, or working together, or just be able to feel things like using several of our senses, right? So certainly I think in sports you can't play hockey remotely, but certainly you can do a lot of other things remotely if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, if you're a writer, if you're a journalist, whatever, if you're a programmer. Certainly it's relatively easy to work remotely, but it doesn't mean that there aren't certain challenges. Like it feels good to go into the office and talk to people that you work with and brainstorm and just let things develop organically, whether it's ideas for work or deepening kind of your personal connection. The other thing is, obviously, if you're just seeing someone on a small screen on Zoom, you're not picking up their physical cues nearly as well, and maybe even you're losing some of their verbal cues just because the audio quality isn't always perfect. And obviously now, the more time we spend on screens, it affects our posture. Like we're we're more hunched over, and our backs get stiff, and maybe we don't have the best chair at home, and it's hard for us to disassociate work time and leisure time because we're just in front of the screen regardless. So there are certainly lots and lots of negative parts and downsides to the way that work has been impacted for the last year and a half, 2 years. But at the same time, I think we gotta address the downsides, but I think there are some upsides for us to capture. And for me, now that I'm working on my own and doing a lot of writing, doing a lot of consultations for players and teams, I actually see some great benefits in terms of using a different way of working, which is asynchronous coaching, as I talked about. So, when we're in a team environment at the rink, we have anywhere between 20 and 25 players that we got to take care of, that we got to capture their attention. It's easy to lose the individual focus. Whereas if you're on Zoom with a client one-on-one, or if you pre-record a video for a client to watch, then you can be extremely focused on the individual. So what that player's skill is, what opportunities we're looking to attack, how was it relevant to them. The most challenging thing in a team context is you can't show clips of everyone, because otherwise the meeting will take 2 hours and then you've lost everybody else. Whereas if you're working one-on-one, you can be super individual. And if you're working one-on-one but asynchronously, then it's even easier, because you no longer have to find a time slot that works for both of you. If I'm working with a player in Sweden, I can, put together a 5-minute video with me narrating over some of his shifts the night before, send it over to him, and then as soon as he wakes up, maybe 5 hours later, it's like middle of the night for me, but for him it's perfect because he can review his clips and get some feedback from me before he heads to the rink. So now that we've taken kind of the time element off the table, we can actually be super individual and super flexible. The other thing is scalability. So if you're working in a team context and you have, let's say, on Thursday, a player reaches out to me talking about how to get off the wall, and then on Friday, another player reaches out to me with the same question, I can maybe either reuse some clips or reuse the entire presentation that I put together. So I'm putting in the same amount of work for 10 players that I am for one, right? I just got to resend that presentation or that short little talk that I made. So super scalable. Once again, if we're doing this face-to-face the old-fashioned way, you're going to have to do the same talk 10 times, which obviously it's not the best from an efficiency point of view. The third is record keeping. So now that we're recording things, and now that we're able to deliver things asynchronously, you can pretty much pull up, let's say if we're in December, I can pull up a meeting that we had in September with the clips and the talking points and see, okay, have we gotten better? And then it's a great feedback both for the player and for me. So maybe I gave that player some cues or some details to work on that haven't translated. Now, it could be his fault that he didn't put in enough reps, or he didn't address maybe the foundational things before dropping in that detail, or maybe it's my fault because I didn't teach it the right way, or I didn't look at the right area. So once again, now that we're recording things and we're taking kind of the time element off the table, we actually have access to a lot of great benefits that can be used in hockey coaching. So a few case studies that have influenced my thinking on this. So the first one is my previous coaching experiences. So between 2014 and 2017, I was a video coach for the McGill Martlets of U Sports Women's Hockey. And then after working as a player development analyst for the Leafs for 2 years, in 2019, 2020, I was an assistant coach with the Toronto Marlies. And I saw a lot of the similar themes in terms of the reliance of face-to-face or synchronous communication holding us back. So first of all, whether we're working with full-time students or whether we're working with pros who have to play, 70 plus times a year, time is at a premium. Like it's difficult for coaches to make time in their daily routines to actually talk to the players. And this is whether we were a very small staff at McGill or a very large staff in Toronto. It's difficult to find even 10 or 15 minutes to talk to a guy because after practice, maybe all of a sudden the guy's gone home or the girl's gone to her class. So if you rely on synchronous coaching, then you're losing a lot of opportunities to communicate with people. And now because these one-on-one conversations are at such a premium, over time it's difficult to get buy-in on all the players, and over time I think the players feel like not that you don't care about them, but that you're not working in their best interest because you haven't really done the work in terms of understanding what that player needs, right? And the most important thing I think as a coach and as a player is feeling that you have a genuine connection, a genuine appreciation for what the other person needs. And so I think a lot of the good coaches that you see, whether it's in hockey or in other sports, they're focused on the feeling aspect, which is really important. Don't get me wrong, but then the opportunity becomes to deliver content in a better way. So I've written about this on the newsletter in the past. It's like, what is this player good at? What does this player do on a frequent basis? You start with that, and you try to tailor content to reinforce the strength in a player's game. What are some things that he's not so good at, but that happens at a high frequency? Well, that's the biggest development opportunity. But once again, if you're always having conversations based on like how you're feeling or building that personal connection, it's good, but you're actually a little bit limited in making your players better. And this is an opportunity where you can deliver some asynchronous coaching with, you can narrate the clips, let's say at night before you go to bed, prepare this for the player, send them the link, and then he can watch it at any time during the day once he wakes up. And then he gets the content, but also I think he gets the feeling that like you're in tune with his game and you understand what you got to do to help him and what he's got to do to help himself, which I think once again, it's like it's a very left brain thing that turns into more of a right brained feeling, right? And this is something that I've really enjoyed playing around with in the past year or so. And I've been able to make some really good breakthroughs with the players I work with, even though we've never met face to face. So I get their clips, I identify some areas for improvement, I give them one homework or one area to work on, and then a month later we get back together and we notice that we were actually able to influence that area, which I think is really exciting. And something that I would say most bench coaches have difficulty doing simply because of the time aspect and how busy everybody is. So one of my big mentors in hockey and in life is DARRYL BELFRY, who I've had a chance to work with in Toronto for 3 years. And looking back, he was probably the first person to really implement asynchronous coaching in hockey, or at least as far as I remember. So what he would do is he would work with his players on the ice during the summer, and then throughout the season, he would track their games statistically, but also pull out certain clips and then relate it back to the concepts that they've worked on over the summer. And once again, he's not trying to find time for like one-on-one Zoom calls or the equivalent. Simply, he's putting the clips together, he's narrating them, and then he's sending a video link to his players that they can consume at their own time. Because obviously NHL players are extremely busy, between travel and games and practices and whatnot. So here's an example of something that's available on YouTube. But so this is a 40-second clip of him working with Nathan MacKinnon, who's been working with him for quite a long time now. So, I mean, what a powerful reminder of an important concept that they've worked on. Whoops. And you know, Darryl's got several of these on his YouTube profile that you can check out. But essentially, what he's getting at here is that the things that a player needs to work on, they don't change that much over time. It's all about building on the foundations and the essentials, and then issuing kind of timely reminders. And the way that he does it is he puts together these short videos, and then he sends it to the players throughout the season with recent clips, but also things that they've worked on the ice previously. Another case study is a really fun consulting gig that I'm doing right now for the CT Whale of the PHF. So it's actually my first time consulting for an entire team. So normally I would get individual players, but here I'm working with head coach Colton Rohr and the rest of the coaching staff. And what I've done is I've actually made a private Substack newsletter for the team's coaches and players. And what I'll do is at different times during the week, I'll post little video breakdowns of team sequences, pre-scouts, or other kind of small homework assignments. And then what I'll do is I'll encourage our players to email me privately if they have any questions or if they need any additional help. And what I find is, you know, when I worked in women's hockey the first time with McGill, a lot of especially women's players, but really all types of players, they're shy at participating during a team meeting. First of all, maybe they might feel uncomfortable sharing kind of what they're thinking, but also they don't want to slow the group down. So if you take the aspect of slowing the group down off the table and you allow them to communicate with you one-on-one on specific things, you'll find that you get a lot more feedback and a lot more questions that eventually kind of reveal ways that you can help your players. So every week after the previous weekend's games, I'll ask the team a question. So it could be like, what's something you did well and what's something you did less well this week? It could be, what's something that you're looking forward to working on the rest of the week? And then by getting answers from essentially every player on the team, like participation is really good. I'm getting, I think out of our 22 players, I'm probably getting 15, 17 emails a week. And so with that high percentage of participation now, I can make time and do, whether it's like a quick 20-minute Zoom call one-on-one with a player, or I can pull out some clips, narrate over them, and then send it to the individual player like DARRYL BELFRY does. So the fact that we're communicating on an asynchronous basis, first of all, it keeps all of us sane, because we got players on our team who are nurses who work 9 to 5. My schedule is a little bit all over the place depending on the week. I'm doing this from Montreal. They're in Connecticut. There would just be almost no opportunities for us to actually get together as a group. Whereas if we're doing this via the newsletter and via email and then via either Zoom or pre-recorded YouTube videos, then it's actually really easy for us to get in touch and to talk about things which are relevant to the game and to ultimately make improvements. So the idea of the presentation is, it's very inspired by the events of the pandemic and how we've had to work differently. And what I'm essentially proposing is that I think it's actually a great thing for hockey that a lot of these things are on the table now. And there's a really great way for us to work smarter, way smarter, and to help our players more.